All right, y'all. Let's see if they offer me some coffee. Got my airplane mode off, so that's good. I don't want that on at all. Yeah, I can't get in that way, so we'll go the other way. All the way out to Bloomington. Let's see if they offer me some coffee. Y'all probably gonna hear a bunch of recording, wind and everything else. Sweet 700. The way parking is a trip. Always arrive at the parking lot 20-30 minutes early. Maybe 15, at the least. Usually I'm a little earlier than this. There we go. I'm trying to close this thing. Got discount tire here. I don't want to close it all the way. Good morning. How you doing? How you close this thing? I just open something else up. That's what I'll do.
You said Derek.
Derek.
Hey, Jenny. Jenny, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And you said Dan?
Dan.
Okay, thank you. One minute. Do you need a longer? Please feel free.
Okay.
Were you able to find the copy?
Yeah. Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
perfect.
Yes. Thank you
You're
so
like the
much.
first person to ever use that.
Oh, I am.
And we've been since November.
A lot of people just like things, they just like the pots and everything,
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
So we just have like a bigger machine in the kitchen. But you're the first one to use it. You broke it in.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then once it's brewed, I'll take you into the room, the conference room where they're going to be having you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, it is
10:58.
10:58.
Can't believe it's the end of July already.
That's insane. It is crazy.
Hi.
How's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
This is Austin.
How's it going? Austin.
Nice
Good to meet you.
I was gonna bring him back.
Oh, well,
What's the date? 30th.
30th.
That is crazy.
I have never seen that sign in book.
I know, I just brought it back today. I didn't realize that Tamara had it. We used to have it a lot, and Heather's like, I don't really need to do it. Just for non-employees.
Yeah. And just for like.
Thank you so
Yep.
much.
How are you?
How are you?
Good, yeah.
This is a nice view.
It's always nice to be on the top floor. Too bad.
I appreciate the hospitality for the coffee.
Oh yeah.
You're a sparkling water guy.
Just for shots, but now we opened it up, so we couldn't. There were some good drinks in there that I always wanted, and they wouldn't give them to me. But yeah, not that big of a fan of sparkling water, but it's just a change of pace, and I end up having it every day.
You know what you should do. You should have sparkling water, and I'm not sure if you're a pie or a cake guy, but I like not meringue, lemon supreme. Lemon supreme and
With sparkling water?
With a sparkling water.
I love
Interesting.
lemon. It's my favorite. Nobody else in my house likes it, so I
Lemon supreme is the best. I mean, meringue is cool too, but lemon supreme is.
don't like the meringue.
I don't like the meringue either. I like the supreme because maybe because of the cream,
Yeah.
you know.
This is Eric.
Right.
Nice to meet you.
So Dan is on a call. I don't know if it's going to be the entire time, but
So this came up. Yeah, I think I'm gonna just us three. I'm sure Dan will join in if he can.
You were not in the first one, right?
no.
Okay. So, do you want to just start by running through a quick recap of your experience and your background for these guys?
Absolutely. Well, I come primarily from like a desktop background. I worked at pretty much all the biggest companies when it comes to Windows 7 migrations, such as Medica, Department of Urban Development, Blue Cross Blue Shield. I've worked at TCS. They were right down the street, a couple blocks down. If you buy a burger or if you drive a car in India, it has something to do with it. They do a lot of managed service support. I've also been a Citrix administrator for a managed service company in St. Paul for a number of years. There I was kind of the front end support when it comes to doing XenApp support, some of the cloud support, some of the monitoring. During that time, I was a technical instructor. I don't know if I talked to you about that a little bit, but the change in my career kind of happened when on Saturdays I started going to the Metro State University to talk to kids. And so then I was asked to write a curriculum for the Microsoft Technology Associate Certification Program. And I did that for about 7 years for those Cyrus organizations. So while I was working these other jobs, after I get off of work, I would go over to Cedar Avenue in South Minneapolis at the park board, and I would have maybe 10 to 15 students, per session, working, pretty much getting them to become IT professionals. And I got pretty much 30 to 60% of the people certified. Almost everybody got jobs. And so I did that over a course of about 7 years. Do you want to ask?
No.
Okay. And so, that's, I'll do a little brief just in case I forget anything. I also worked at Hiawatha Academies after I left Syntax. They heard about my community work doing the tech training. And so I worked there, until they had a layoff at the beginning of 2020. They let everybody know that they would, pretty much half the staff would be cut because of charter school. So Hiawatha Academies, they work with a lot of data. That's how I had my first time working with Salesforce. And so you had Salesforce, the Salesforce instance. You had Tableau feed into that because they're a data-driven organization. And pretty much, if you guys ever heard of Infinite Campus, if you have children,
I used that when I was in school.
Yeah. So the grading,
Grades and stuff.
the grades, when it comes to, let's say, based on, you know, how much a family might make, they will determine if you get lunch or not. It could be health data that could be in Infinite Campus, and pretty much anything that would feed into the Salesforce instance. So I was pretty much like the Salesforce database administrator. I kind of had to learn Salesforce a little fast because I found out that the person that was training me, my manager, was leaving. So I had to kind of train the new manager that came on maybe about 4 months later, which was a good experience. So, you know, and then I was a liaison in between IT. We had a managed service company. I think it was called Imagine IT. And because I had that system administrator experience, I was able to resolve a lot of issues, even though I didn't have administrative rights. So, you know, when I worked there, I supported maybe about 5 different schools. We had about pretty much all the schools were over in South Minneapolis. So sometimes I would go and I would tour to, you know, different schools, talk to the principal, ask the teachers what kind of features they would like to see in Infinite Campus and Salesforce. So kind of like a Salesforce / BA kind of position. After that, I worked at a company, a startup company called Flywheel. If you guys have ever had an MRI, you know that how loud that can be. When it comes to PACS and DICOM formats and things of that nature, it's pretty much uploaded into their software, and we were supporting like the back end piece of the software, such as Docker, Kubernetes. The front end was a software where when you load it up with Linux, you can see X-rays a lot faster. So they run what they call gears on artificial intelligence. After that, you know, I started doing API support at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo was kind of a startup gateway program. That was a contract. And pretty much working with Apigee, APIs, Postman. That's how I started to kind of learn Postman. If you ever buy something from PayPal, we probably had something to do with it. I won't name the companies, but pretty much all the big companies you see, Fortune 500 companies, they all run a lot of their software through APIs. Some people choose Gateway, they might choose other different programs. With Wells Fargo, we supported the software developers. So if a software developer, if they were to call in, they might be using something like Python or some kind of other scripting language in order to onboard them. So we might have a software developer that might call in and say, hey, I have a question on PKI, public infrastructure. What should I do with this public key, or what should I do with this private key? A lot of times what people would do is they would accidentally send us the private key, and we're like, don't do that. That's a real big breach, you know. But we would provide documentation on that. Sorry, there's some good coffee. And so I learned how to use Apigee at that time. Learned how to use Postman, primarily Splunk. Splunk, what we would do is we would look at the logs, we would comb through the logs, and a lot of times what I would do is I would issue some commands that would drill it down to root cause, and then if there's an issue, I could look at the permissions in API Apigee. If that doesn't work, we would probably talk to the onboarding and the implementation team. Kind of similar, or I would create like a Jira report, a user story. We use Jira and we use ServiceNow. So if there was an outage, we would use ServiceNow as well, and then we would assign tasks. Same thing with Optum. The difference with Optum was you weren't really dealing with any direct software developers. I was dealing with patients that had an issue where, let's say there was a husband and a wife, they could have been separating and they don't want their accounts to be merged. So we would have to open up a task with ServiceNow, look into Splunk, see if there's an issue, and we would delegate those tasks. So I kind of took somewhat of a lead role when that comes to mind. What they would do is you'd have level 1 and you would have level 2 that would call in, and they would do like a password reset. They weren't able to really look at the back end when it comes to Postman. So that's where my team came in, dealing with, for example, let's say you take a vaccine, or let's say you broke a hip or something like that. Some of the data might be missing. So we were kind of, if you guys are familiar with my chart, it was pretty much like my chart. Yeah.
That was for Blue Cross, you said?
Optum, United Health Group, Optum, they're kind of
subsidiary of that. Yeah. So what kind of made the pivot from more of the IT analyst to like the business analyst type stuff?
It was kind of accidental, you know. After I was working at Flywheel, you know, I got contacted by Persistent. Persistent is pretty much a rival of TCS. So, you know, even though I had some of that, a little bit of that data support with Hiawatha Academies and, you know, going back into like, you know, doing more back-end support, you know, I got called up for a contract and I just kind of rolled with it. So, I mean, what's interesting about my career is, I don't know, it feels like I was kind of chosen to a certain degree. Like when I was doing desktop support and when I was interviewing for Syntax as a Citrix administrator, it didn't say it was a Citrix administrator position. You know, it was something that I wanted to learn. It just said tech support, and that tech support is very vague. That can mean anything, you know. So that position, it wasn't like I was trying to be a Citrix administrator. And it seems like a lot of positions that I work, you know, I kind of just ended up with them, you know, especially like when I was a technical instructor. That was by accident. I was going to Metro State University just to talk to kids. And the instructor, he didn't show up. And then he didn't show up a third time. You know, so he just never showed up. And so I started bringing in people I knew, like Cisco engineers and people that say, hey, you know, you can get into IT and this is what it looks like. We would show them TeamViewer. My career was kind of uncanny and unorthodox, to say.
So your long-term goals are to continue within the BA role?
I would like, you know, product management or product owner, if that's any different. I want to kind of get into that, you know, maybe standing up stuff and then, you know, collaborating, looking at that edge of things.
So with the development, like the tickets you're writing up, how much of it was like support of like problems that came up, bugs, versus like forward-looking, like development to like improve the software? I'm
gonna be honest with you, we didn't really have a lot of opportunity for improvement because we didn't work directly on the onboarding team. It was mainly from like somewhat of a break fix. I got to see some of the process, especially, you know, at Flywheel. I was looking at we were able to see the whole lifecycle management. So like if there was a bug, you could create a story. You might load up something in Linux and see, you know, reproduce the issue, and then, you know, you might do what they call Kubernetes. Is kind of hard. If you guys ever watch Star Trek Borg, it's kind of like that. It's like it's an independent body of pods and replicas and stuff.
Yeah, I was like a Star Trek. I was like, that's right.
Okay, if you guys, anybody Game of Thrones fans?
I haven't seen that one.
No, I'm not.
Brett probably has.
Y'all are killing me. No, who am I going to talk to? Okay, so, all right, so you have what they call these pods. Think of them as virtual machines, and if you kind of look at that graph you guys got right there in the back, you say it was 500K, so you got one pod here. That pod goes down, it kind of self-replicates. So it's essentially like Wolverine or Deadpool. I want to see that. They kind of self-replicate. So if there's an issue with the pod that goes down, we would reboot it. But then on the front end, we see if there has to be a user story we create with Jira. So, you know, I might open up what's that program called? It's Atlassian. Help me out. Atlassian. It's a documentation.
Confluence.
Yeah. So you have the Confluence documentation will run these run books. And then, you know, you create a user story and say, hey, well, this customer wants a special feature. They want an enhancement or something like that. So you could write a user story for that. So that's how I kind of got some of my lifecycle management chips in. But the last few positions we weren't able to really give our input. I mean, we were able to get our input, but, you know, it's kind of top down with Optum. There's like, well, you know, you just
a lot more structured.
Yep. They're like, hey, we don't really want to hear it. Even there were some things that we said that we wanted to say. It was like, oh well, this is the way we do things here, and I said, okay. You know, so there was actually an issue with ServiceNow where the whole ServiceNow went down, and I lost all of my dashboards and everything, and they didn't have any redundancy. And, you know, before that, you know, I said, well, you know, who's the SME that runs the ServiceNow? Is there anybody that I could talk to? And they're like, oh, you know, don't worry about it. And so, you know, so I didn't really get to put a lot of input, you know, but it was a good situation.
Do you have a question? So when you're writing up those user stories, how do you go about like gathering your requirements and prioritizing the changes that are requested?
Well, when we did it, it was kind of attributed to, you know, a break fix issue. So I might say, customer tried this, and that, and the third. and then I put the priority might be sent to like one of the developers, and then you pretty much just send it over to them. And if they made like a merge request, or if they pushed, you know, something through GitLab, when it becomes the new software that comes out, what we would do is we would just set up a time with the customer. Most of the time QA would test it. We did a little bit of, you know, testing for ourselves. You know, we open up, they would have different, you know, versions of Kubernetes called like version 2 and version 3. But when it came to like the user stories in that regard, we just created them in Jira, set the priority. If it was like a request where somebody just says, hey, you know, I just want Kirby's Dream Land to just pop up, you know, that might not be a higher priority versus somebody that had a bug that made it where MRI was having, you know, they couldn't view an MRI or XML file.
Okay. So you guys would you get the bug would come in and you just go directly back to the developer. Communicating back and forth with the developer.
Yeah, we would test it first, and then I would assign myself as a watcher. And then I might take a look at it and they say, well, hey, there's been an update. And so then what I could do is I could just go back to the team and say, hey, well, you know, let's test it again. And then they might roll out 10.2 or 10.3 or whatnot.
So do you do any validation on that to make sure that it's correct, the requirement was met before you deliver, or you just rely on QA?
We would rely on QA most of the time. Most of the time we would.
No, I was actually going to ask something similar to that, because you were kind of saying, I was like pieces of QA and BA, and I was trying to get a sense where you made it clear that you were just basically get handed off from the QA.
Yeah, pretty much. We didn't do a whole, you know, the QA, they had a QA and a development team that pretty much, they would do any refinement. They might mention it, like I'll see an update like, oh, well, this is fixed. They would have these things, not bridges, it would be like merge requests and things of that nature. So when you push a merge request down, you know, to update some of the software, there might be something where we use something called Terraform. They'll tell us, well, that's ready, but we wouldn't necessarily go into the code and look at the code and say, this is what the issue is. It would just be, oh, this software is ready, and if you want to go in and play with the sandbox, you can.
So as far as user acceptance testing, do you have any experience with that, or facilitating any type of user acceptance testing?
I can say maybe working with Hiawatha Academies where I made some changes to the Salesforce instance in that regard. You know, where somebody might say, because see, with the Salesforce instance that we were working with, there were several different pieces of software that were kind of bonded together. You would have a video HR software. So for example, let's say you guys are interviewing me now, you would interview me, you would send me a link, and then you would ask me questions, and then I would speak to the camera. That was a piece of software that was bonded on to the Salesforce instance. So somebody might have said, well, we want some changes to that, or form assembly, we want some changes to that. And then people might test the surveys, because we would send out surveys. It was all data driven. It would all go back to Tableau for visualization. So like stakeholders and, you know, directors and the people that put all the big money behind it can see it. So they might say, well, we want another graph or something like that. So maybe when it comes to that user acceptance testing, but not, I don't know if it's kind of the standard you're looking at where it's, you know, it's maybe thousands of users, and I make one change and then they take a look at it and then they go back and forth and stuff like that. We didn't have a developer team at Hiawatha Academies. It was just kind of me and then my manager, and then I would pretty much be the focal sole person when it comes to the technology. So whenever we would, whenever they make a change, you might have somebody say, hey, well, I want to do this with Salesforce. I want to add that. Well, that might cost $2,000-$3,000. We're a charter school. We can't afford it. But what we could do is maybe, they had this thing in there. I kind of played around with it. It's like it's an automated piece of Salesforce Lightning. I think it's Salesflow or something like that. But basically you could tell this to do that, and then you could follow logic, and we might be able to go around some of the things that they wanted. But if I'm not using a third party, you know, open source tool, yeah, we can't make that change. So I had to politely kind of tell them, you know, we might be able to try something else or revisit it.
So with Salesforce, so it sounds like whenever there's something that your instance wasn't able to do, you guys would go out to see which packages or like which other like third party could solve for that? Were you using like the objects or like fields and making changes to that?
I was doing some of that. I actually had, because I didn't know anything about Salesforce initially, so I took Trailhead, how to change objects, and I'll be very candid. I haven't touched Salesforce in quite a long time, but I'd go in there. We had an issue where certain people were seeing things they weren't supposed to, so we had to go and look at some of the permissions, and it reminds me of kind of like Active Directory on steroids, where you can't see the trees and forests, and then you can just kind of change certain permissions where people can open up different things. But I did modify some objects. Actually, I didn't really try to modify much because we had a somewhat of a stable environment when it comes to like form assembly and all those other things, so I didn't want to change too much. But for example, like form assembly and Tableau, they all fed into those objects. Form assembly is basically a piece of software where you take surveys, and there's pieces in Salesforce that it integrates with. So you have to have a certain object and whatnot. And then if you're going to make a new survey, then you can just clone it and then, change some things around.
We're actually about to start into kind of a pretty big security project in the larger org. That's going to be pretty substantial in terms of just the default sharing. So if you do have security background, sound like you do, that'd probably be very useful because there's not a lot of people who understand how the stack works.
I'll be honest, it's been so long since I looked at it, but it's kind of like this. Basically, you could have like a public facing, like, okay, let's say we got the sales department. The sales department is able to look at this, that, and the third. And then the other department, you could say they could have, whether it's read-only files or not read-only files or certain different privileges. It kind of acts as kind of like Active Directory with a phone book. So I can give you access to look at a dashboard and then maybe create a group. And there's a bunch of other little things. It can get stringent. It can get stringent, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah. So it's Salesforce security. When you were saying it's like that, it really sort of is because it's layered.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do, you really just have to kind of like approach it like from ground up, almost strategically as you're going about your permissions, your roles, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, and you got to be careful about it because like you can lock it down to where, and it looks, the thing with Salesforce permissions, and it looks like it makes sense. With Active Directory, you might say, well, don't give access to that tree, and then that's it. You don't hear anything else. That's just, it is what it is. But then when you get down into Salesforce, it's a whole bunch of different it's kind of like, it's like the Borg. It's kind of like the Borg almost in a way. It got all these different strains and stuff.
I guess what's your experience? Do you have any experience in like financial services industry? Like we're started out kind of on the wealth management side, but Simplicity as a whole, insurance, annuities, and all of that. Financial product distribution is what I call. Do you have any experience in the industry at all? That
no, none whatsoever. Besides looking at one of my Empower 401k accounts, I in terms of insurance, I work with a lot of, not from annuities and things, but like health insurance, Optum, Medica, supporting like the end user, travelers insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, AIG. That was my last one. AIG was a turning point in my career. AIG was the last Windows 7 migration project that I worked on. That was out there in Oakdale, Minnesota. I started to kind of change from just break fix to more, kind of seeing what that lifecycle management looks like a little bit, having to work with some of the Dell PMs, because we work with Dell. So it was AIG, it was Dell, and it's about, how it goes with these contracts, 50 other companies. So with Oakdale, Minnesota, they had to get certified for the applications to run on Windows 7. So I was kind of taking a little bit of a step back from just deployment. They kind of gave me full creative control. I was able to be King Joffrey without being a tyrant. If you guys have ever seen Joffrey, I was able to pretty much, they said, hey, hire I was able to kind of hire some of my friends from Travelers and all my, because I met a lot of people through these Windows 7 projects. So I just kept in contact with them, and I said, hey, are you working? We'll come over here. So I could kind of just bring in some of my friends that were working, at the Windows 7 migration projects before. So we had a good system administrator team. We had a good golden image. If you guys don't know what that is, basically it's just the image of Windows 7, and it's going to spit out to all to the deployments. And so I had to work with a lot of the packaging engineers. I had to work with a lot of the PMs, and I had to sit on these meetings with executives, for a good portion of the day. So I was kind of stepping back from doing the break fix, and kind of leading the team in terms of, reporting and making reports on the spreadsheet, reporting back out to New York, and we became a depot because we had the best gold image in North America. So we became a depot for New York and for people to send their laptops in. So that kind of gave me my team lead experience. Another situation where I just thought I was just going in to deploy the computers. A guy trained me in, one of the leads came, he was supposed to stay, he couldn't stay, he had to go back to Texas. So guess who gets to be the team lead? I told him I don't got no lead experience. He said, well, hey, so that was a good experience with AIG. That was one of the last insurance programs besides Optum that I worked with. And then, going into TCS, that's when I started getting into like the end user experience when it comes to like Commvault migrations and WAN desegregations. And from then my career shot up, Citrix administrator, and then on top of the technical instruction, that's when everything really, that's when I started getting my stride. I started getting confident. Because I was somewhat confident doing the Windows 7 migrations and stuff, but that was kind of like putting my skin in the game. That was pretty much me. I looked at that as paying dues. Like I used to tell my classes, I said, look at the help desk as paying dues. You're learning about the business. The help desk is much harder than actual desktop support. I think help desk is harder than system administration, to be honest, because you got all these issues coming at you, and it's you get 200 calls a day or something. So,
No, this is so. Are you? This is for BA, right?
Yeah. I guess I had to touch on when you're talking about the postman stuff. Were you doing the API calls, or you were troubleshooting when the API calls on postman stuff?
A little bit of both. They would have what they call these templates, and initially with Optum we were supposed to be using. Well, okay, let me take a step back. Fargo we were using Postman. I didn't use it that much because I found out we were supposed to be using Postman, but I found, my niche in Splunk. While people were looking at the calls and doing all these calls and stuff like that, what I started doing is once I found out they had something called like an EID in Optum and something kind of similar with Wells Fargo. Once someone makes a call, it gives an error. I said, well, there's no point in me going into Postman if I could just go to Splunk and it gives me everything I need. So what I did is, once I found out that Splunk will give me the root cause, I just copy the whole thing and paste it in the ticket. And some of the software team was like, "Hey, where'd you figure that out?" I said, "Man, I just I seen all these errors," and they say, "Can you drill down and go a little deeper?" I said, "I could become an oil rig if you want me to." So I go down there and I grab the whole thing, and then I either copy and paste it or I put it in a zip file, and that helped the implementation team a lot. Because people were sending screenshots of the API. I mean, that's like taking a grain of sand and saying, "Hey, this Martian see it on the moon." Like, that's too far. You need to. So I would copy and paste that, or use what they call There's something in Chrome that people use as well. It was called. I can't remember what it was, but you go into the developer tool and you capture the data. You do like a little recording, and then you could bundle up all the data of the HTML and everything, and then you could send those to the developers. Mm-hmm. So that kind of saved people some time as well. I just can't remember what it was. I don't remember what it is. If I seen it, I could tell you.
Yeah, you were looking at all the requests that were going
console
on.
Log.
The console logs. Yep, the console logs. So I would start putting those into the ticket as well. So with Splunk just gives you, it just tells you what it is. It tells you exactly what it is, and then you could make it, how you want it. You could funnel it down. And I started doing that with Optum as well. So with the APIs for Fargo, we would have these templates, but I just stopped using it for a while because it was pointless. Now, what after I had to use the APIs, they would give us a template of a whole bunch of them, and then you put in what they call the EID, you put in the patient name, and then you had to put in a bunch of other stuff, and then you got to go back down. Initially, that was very cumbersome with Postman, and they said we couldn't use Postman, so we had to switch to Insomnia halfway through the contract. Then they said, well, you can't use Insomnia anymore, we got to go back to Postman. So there was a lot of miscommunications because there were so many contractors that were coming and going and trimming people. But we did have templates for Postman. We did have to, there was like some security settings we had to use and things of that nature. So, but my go-to tool was Splunk, primarily because that saved time and it rectified issues.
Yeah, we maintain a pretty large API layer, internal API layer that we do dev for, but then you also have to test upon it. So using Postman and we build out collections and things. But if you're already sort of comfortable doing that, that's further along in terms of I don't know how much you be doing the testing as well. Or
we're gonna start it that way just because it'll help get used to.
Yeah, I don't really see a huge distinction between QA and BA because a lot of the things that you have to do kind of go together, so it's useful to be able to do both. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every BA should be able to kind of go down and be doing the QA testing stuff. I think to be able to troubleshoot like when there's just an error message and get the actual root cause of it. We have like some reports like exception log that'll say some things, but then you can. Yeah, we do console log troubleshooting a little bit with the developers and certain things, and then if we can't figure that out, we'll send it just to the developer and be like, all right, you need to figure this out a little bit, and it's also, it's less formal in the aspect of the Optum and stuff, like pretty structured. You have a set like template and stuff, and we have certain ways of what's probably how you should do it, but also sometimes like they have an error that's coming up quick, like just go directly to the developer.
We talk about the managed package and all that, what we're doing. Yeah, so we kind of do two sorts of development. One, we do development within a managed package. That's basically installed, compiled software that lives inside of Salesforce. Okay. So it's just pure software development, right? With that, there's like realities of how you have to do bug fix, and that's what he was talking about. Because within a managed package, you don't have native logs because they're hidden behind their namespace. So we've developed a means to actually persist those logs so you can kind of get into it. But on the other side of the organization, you just have all the debug availability that Salesforce has. So as far as that goes, there's different ways. But in all cases, you can get to that log level events, and you're correct. From a dev perspective, nothing in terms of strings or anything like that really matters. If you can get to those logs, that's all you really need.
Okay. Now, with Salesforce, so you guys use Salesforce. So for your wealth and your annuity packages that the customer sees, right?
So I guess I'll go over on that. So we have our internal software. So me and worked here like 6 years, but originally the Wealth was a different startup company that was sold into, and on that team we had our own internal software for the advisor. Historically, what the tech, like our development team would do, plus also had an internal Salesforce for our operations team that processes cases, and our trading team also uses the internal Salesforce. So we had our internal Salesforce, but most of our development that goes through us to use. So the advisor is kind of our client of they have 60 clients of their own that have, in 401ks and stuff like that. They go through us, so our user base isn't that high on that side, but since each advisor we get a chunk of that, they're big clients,
Okay.
And it's not the end consumer of like the client that has their account managed. They're not using that. And then on the other side of things that now we're getting more into and we were acquired like 3 years ago, so we've been in the swing of things for a while, but now we like 5 months back kind of started leading their team from like a business analyst and product standpoint of the development life cycle, being in charge of that and what we're developing. But that's more internal Salesforce for our client is our employees, operations,
Okay.
Using that. And then we also have like some other advisors, agents that use that, but it's more so getting them. So it kind of, that's what he was saying more on the Salesforce debugging side. Our Salesforce is for them.
Yeah, we've been doing pretty big data where we collate data from course. So there's like ETL work that needs to be done, but it's wholly separate from the Spark work, which is that managed package. So it's actually kind of nice from a person in your position. You get to kind of see both, because that's more applicable to like just every company versus just a specific software. It's just kind of like it's just Spark, right? It's not really. It's just that.
It's unique software that you're doing it within that, but things don't really pertain to that. I guess I was gonna ask you, who was like the user for like the softwares, or like the end user, like Optum and stuff.
Well, the end user, we're supporting the patient. So the patient calls up and says, "Well, I can't live, my X-ray." Yep. Now, but I never ever talk to the patient, so I'm just like a poltergeist. I'm just a Blumhouse. So level 1 or level 2, they hit us on Teams. Hey, well, Derek, this user right here has, and we will work with providers too. It was a very, very matrixed environment, very, very confusing and convoluted, because when we came on board initially, the manager kind of said, "Well, look, I need this, I need that, and I don't know nothing." And I said, "Does anybody know anything?" He says, "No, nobody doesn't know squat." He says, "I'm frustrated, Derek. I need you to do this, that." I said, "Look, okay, does anyone have the dashboard? Is there a SME? Who knows where the SME is for the ServiceNow dashboard?" Because I said they wanted the tickets consolidated and they wanted broken down. So I got that declassified. I don't know. I'm like, "Oh Lord." I said, "Okay, can you show me the dashboard?" So I seen the dashboard. I seen who it was owned by. He's not at the company anymore. And I said, "I wonder if I could just clone this and duplicate." I said, so I was able to use the old dashboards, because they at one point they wanted to rebuild old dashboards. I said, let's not reinvent the wheel. We don't have to build society from ground up like it's post-apocalyptic. And we just used that dashboard, and I just made some changes. And then what I did is each day I said, let's keep it simple. I'll export an Excel file, and then I'll just say who wants these tickets. So I might take a boatload of tickets, and I'm really supposed to be just focusing on divvying out the tickets, but it's so many tickets. I got to do something. So sometimes I might come in an hour and a half earlier. I'd have my coffee with my peppermint mocha, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just take a bunch of these, and then I'll divvy out the rest to the team. And we'd have it was an agile environment or scrums. We'd have daily scrums. We have about 2 meetings a day, and then what we do is I would join the manager meeting where you would have because you'd have Rhapsody, and then you'd have 3 or 4 different outputs. You'd have IDX, MDM, and Rhapsody. Rhapsody is like a whole nother thing, but it goes into MDM. They were going to get rid of MDM and just use IDX or one or the other. So you got to kind of, work with all these different teams for something. So you might have to go to one person for something and another person. And then, of course, he doesn't know. So then you go to another person and start compiling these lists. Okay, who is the SMEs that we know? These contractors may not be here long, so let's just find out. And so, I didn't have to deal directly with the patients. I dealt with level 1, level 2, and then the providers. Like, you might have a patient, okay, his thing ain't working. Well, he has a platinum plan. I don't even know what the platinum plan is. They never tell us what the platinum plan is, but you can go to a different provider and they'll tell you, well, he has that plan. It is pertinent. He has to have that plan. If that plan isn't inputted somewhere, it doesn't work. Fargo was mainly working with the developers. The developers were the customers. I mean, sometimes we would have people coming in and it would just be, they'll say, hey, I want to get on board. He thinks the tech support line is the person that would get him to sign up. No, that's like the treasury department and a bunch of other stuff. So sometimes I would say, well, hey, that's still a customer though. Everyone that calls this line is a customer. So I treat it as such. So I just send that person to the sales department. And so then now, they might get on board it that way if everything lines up.
Yeah, so when we have our operations team, will get calls from the advisor, and then they're able to troubleshoot some of it if they've seen that issue come up and it's simple. Otherwise, they'll pass it over to us.
Okay.
Same kind of thing over there.
So this position is pretty much business analysis based on the Salesforce instance and looking at the back end of that.
I'd say it's more of a useful skill. I mean, more so we're doing ongoing development, trying to improve the system and make it better. It's two things. I mean, we're trying to obviously maintain the systems right now so they're working for the user, but then also how can we make it better, improve it, and get it a lot. So I mean, ideally, we're just trying to keep the development, our focus, keep development moving forward.
Okay.
But then problems come up all the time that we have to troubleshoot and get resolved.
So you guys are open for change, you're open for new ideas and processes?
I think that is the job, right?
Okay.
Because we're especially in the larger organization, that's like the primary focus. They actually have an acronym for it, BDP, Best Damn Platform.
That's
That's legitimately the name of it. And as a part of that, it goes into the individual processes. And what you were talking about finding the SMEs that are associated with the process and figure out what exactly is this and why do we need it, that will come up all the time. Because a lot of these processes, they're not rationalized. The last project that I was just on, I sort of had to sort of self-BA it. And it really is that. There's a few people in the company that tend to be the linchpins of that kind of information. So you're always just trying to get it. And I think you'll find that you just basically have to get good at farming that out because, you know, there's not a lot of documentation. That's we need to get better with that. So I think your experience, like what you were talking about, is really relevant to that larger project, just because it's the reality of the situation. There's not like, you can't go to a Confluence document, read it, it's just not there.
There's a lot of stuff that being able to kind of figure out on the fly. It sounds like my experience of that is really helpful because there isn't not everything. I mean, we're in a larger company now, but we operate very much like a smaller company where it's startup type.
Okay.
I'm not going to say like full on startup culture, but it is like, I mean, we're trying to...
Simplicity in the last 2 years has purchased 40 companies, right? So it's like, even though Simplicity, macro Simplicity is actually pretty big, most of people's experience, similar to ours, was with a smaller company pre-purchase, right?
Okay.
So that's just the reality of it. You have these little silos that are largely independent, and we're trying to kind of build something that sits on top of them that, you know, they share processes and things like that.
Yeah, right now, I mean, there's like the internal salesforce org is just kind of for their project this year for the operations team is to improve that and really overhaul it to make it much better experience for the annuity and life insurance operations team to operate in. So it's like ideally we would focus all of our time on, you know, just the improvement in writing up the tickets and the requirements for that and Spark of what's going forward, but then still plenty of times something comes up. It's like, oh, this advisor didn't able to do this, and then you spend 3 hours of the day troubleshooting that one issue, and you're not able to do that. But it's different from like some of the bigger companies, corporations, where it's like you have your set software, your program, and you're just trying to maintain that thing, and you're barely making any changes. Like we're pretty consistently trying to make changes.
I like that. I like the idea of, you know, I've had a dynamic career. I have a dynamic mind. You know, I don't think I told you guys this, but you know, initially, you know, I wanted to be an entomologist. You know, so I started collecting praying mantises years ago. You know, I'd sit there and watch things, and I'd actually document it. You know, and even though I ended up in IT and stuff like that, I like things that shift around. You know, like sometimes that makes people nervous. It doesn't really make me nervous. You know, when I was working at Fargo, that was, you know how big Fargo is. Fargo, their gateway program is relatively new. I don't even think it was 5 years old. They just started, when I came aboard and they had Jira, they had another ticketing system, and they were just starting to get into ServiceNow. Now, it's not that they didn't have it. ServiceNow, they've had ServiceNow as Wells Fargo platform. I mean, I believe ServiceNow has been a standardized global ticketing system for probably maybe the last decade, at least 5 to 6 years. But you still have some companies. I mean, I've seen some companies where they're still on Remedy. I'm just like, oh man, like Remedy is just, you guys probably used Remedy before. It's just, I've never been anywhere where Remedy was. It's just slow. I think it's just innately slow. It's just like a snail of a system. And so ServiceNow, when I was at Fargo, we used ServiceNow in conjunction with Jira. Jira was like the frontline ticketing system. So it's almost like the tickets that you write, they're all user stories. They all act and they act like user stories. So some of the experience that I got there working with Jira, you would make some of these changes and they all just look like Jira stories. So if you were a person that would want to get into like development and stuff like that, you're dealing with Jira all day. And then ServiceNow is for like the big stuff. Like if something goes out, sometimes I will work on like Saturdays on the weekends, and it just be like somebody does an update, kind of like what happened to CrowdStrike, and none of the APIs work. Well, then they don't put up a service now. We'd have to get on the war room and bridge it out, So
that's interesting. That's sort of the opposite of my experience with the companies that use ServiceNow and Jira. ServiceNow, you get all the inputs from everyone, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we have a ticketing system that in the larger org that's sort of built out. It works much the same as you do ServiceNow. You just take requests from people, operations, whatever it's going to be, and then eventually those get collated into like what you would actually work on, and those would become Jira. So it's basically flipped on its head for what you were just saying.
Okay.
Literally, what's your experience like with Excel and just data and that kind of stuff? I mean, will we exporting stuff from Salesforce and into change it?
I don't know how to make those, what do they call those things? They're like, not baby script, it's a
Macro?
I haven't really used macros or, so when I was working with Optum, what I would do is I would export the Excel, and then I would move the little cursors, and, then I might Control A and then sort them, so I would do, so basic use of Excel. Now pivot tables, I didn't really do any of those, but basic use of exporting it and then like modifying the data that way. I would move those cursors around, those toolbars, in order to get, for example, like I want this ticket and find out what this ticket, how many tickets were closed. Most of that was built off of the dashboard itself, is the filter in Salesforce to say, okay, well, and we had to really play around to get the template we wanted to find out what tickets that were, for example, classification 3, classification 1 or 2, health data, vaccinations, and then so I had to export those, and then I would sort them out that way.
If you understand data, just like, and you have more experience with Excel, you'll pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any, it's not any super complex you'd need to be able to do Excel. So just basically when you have a basic understanding of it, that helps, but like, I mean, we can teach a simple formula if it's needed, whatever, it's not super huge.
And there's a million YouTubes for it too, right?
Oh yeah, I'm
as long as we're able to pick up on this.
Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah. More from the technical questions and team autonomy. If you guys could speak a little bit more to like, I think I talked to you guys about it before, but like if your experience in working here and the culture of the company and learning curve and things of that nature.
So it's actually interesting. When I started, this was years ago. I've been here 6 years now. When I started, we were building out the technology team, which eventually became the team of developers everybody was here. When they originally were on a different version of it, that was done by a third party primarily, and just the oversight was sort of done here, but the person who was doing it was actually another third party as well. So it was like it was a completely different structure. So I got hired, myself and another guy who's no longer here, to become like basically the first internal software team, and then kind of build it out from there. So the culture, as far as that goes, we sort of built to be what we wanted it to be. And that's kind of you might take a step back, but we've sort of formed this situation now where I think it's you have the ability to have a pretty big impact based upon because you have a certain amount of latitude. Some companies you might actually we hired someone who's just like that. You work on a project and you really just don't ever get to do anything just because their restrictions are so so heavy. That's not really the case here. You're able to really affect the business just because we have a lot of opportunity to do so. Right?
Okay. Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm the head of the meetings.
He was asking about kind of culturally, I was talking about how things have changed from the Jet BI was the consulting firm that originally built out Spark. As they left, we just took it on ourselves, and because of that, had to hire everyone. And so everyone here is, besides, everyone within the last 6 years. I was like, most within the last 3 or 4.
Yeah, the team's been expanding, so we've added to it. But yeah, you have a lot of flexibility of like what you're working on in terms of like if you're interested in something, you can definitely go more into that. And I think everybody's like obviously you don't want to screw up, but it's like you're able to like learn from things. It's not rigid. Go into it.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like a take ownership type culture where it's like if you want to take on projects and run with them, I'm going to let that happen. I think, and like he was saying, we'd much rather find out like there's going to be limitations or there's things we don't know about in a certain project earlier on so we know what to plan for long term, right? So not as focused on like mistakes or things being wrong as much as just getting all the information that we need early on in the project, right? So
we used to be almost
open-minded, I would say.
We used to almost be exclusively POC. Now we try to plan things more ahead of time. But
he's just been working on a project for 4 months. Oh yeah, he's got it figured.
It is raining.
What would you say the learning curve, is it kind of just, like you said, there's no set documentation, so you're just kind of osmosis?
There's 2 parts to that. The salesforce side, there's a lot of documentation, right? It's like just learning how to do Salesforce. That's an ongoing thing, and there's trainings for it. But what I was talking about, like the business documentation, that's just learning the business over time. Sometimes it's like building the relationships, understanding who you need to talk to. And as a part of that, it's just kind of building out like the best practices for how we should remedy that situation. Like maybe we do some confluence or whatever it's going to be.
Okay, so you will be for this role. Like if you guys could walk me through, I guess a day in the life of who to talk to, you would say internally or some people out as well, outside or not outside of the company, but phone calls and
Yeah, you guys want to take that? Or?
You can start.
I'll start. So yeah, it's kind of like the call I just got off was with our contracting team, which is just some changes they want in Salesforce for their process. So it's kind of like day in the life would be like we all talk about what the ongoing projects are and who's working on what part of it. Then you might have like a call or 2 with people from the business. So we call them like a subject matter expert or something. So like someone here, like the traders or the contracting team, it'll be kind of communicating what we're working on versus what they want and kind of bridging that gap, right? So you gotta kind of know what we're doing and our priorities as well as theirs and kind of how that stuff works. As far as learning curve though, it's mostly just like any other business, right? There's salespeople, there's clients, they have workflows that they go through to execute on those businesses. And those units themselves have documentation. So like if we wanted to have you sit with trading for a week or something, they can go through their processes. So it's a little bit osmosis, but it'll be a lot of like collaborating with our team to determine which parts we need to work on first, right?
Okay.
I would say
A lot of it is like they want us to fix everything all the time, so it's a little bit of managing that too, of like what's actually important.
I mean, I'd say especially like right away, maybe it will also be internal communication and stuff. Like, say most of like the people that we're talking to on a daily basis, like our operations and trading team for the well, since we're also like in the same office, they'll be sending us messages of like, hey, can you get this or can you do that? But like in terms of the annuity and life insurance side, I mean, he'll be on calls like with some of the more management there deciding, but there's not too much like direct stuff to us. It kind of goes to our tech support team that does tickets, and then goes through us. So especially right away, it was just be all mostly internal stuff and not fielding calls or anything from some random person on the other side of the business by any means.
What would be the biggest pain points that you see in this organization? And for, let's say I came aboard and whatnot, what would be some of the things that you guys would be looking to or expecting out of this position?
Yeah, so pain points is going to be like I said, just a lot of projects, so a lot of things with not necessarily clear direction at the start, right? So it's kind of navigating that a little bit, like taking someone's idea and making it into a real process that we can actually execute on.
Okay.
That's probably the biggest, and then just busyness. Like we have a lot of projects. That's why we're hiring, so hopefully that alleviates some of it. As far as expectations, it's really, we're looking for someone that can take ownership eventually of parts of the process and kind of, we work super collaboratively on the BA team to kind of, get all the different requests and projects in line with the overall vision. So being able to help us do that and kind of communicate our priorities to the broader org and understand how we deliver on things that's kind of what we need the most, and documentation to his point, like being willing to kind of take things and run with them and work with like less direction. I think is kind of a key part of it.
I think it's getting better now, but even like a year ago, I think there's a misunderstanding on how long things take. Not just
from the broader
not just the development process, but there's like a testing process. There's like deployment training and all of these other things, and it's sometimes from the people making requests and people that you get requirements from. It's managing the expectations of how long does that actually take to turn around. Even if you have the wherewithal and the capacity to work on it immediately, it doesn't mean it's going to get immediately done.
Right. So do you guys work in my past we had one thing in some of the companies where they called them like two week sprints. Do you guys work in sprints?
Yeah, so we do agile. We
Agile.
do 2-week sprints for both. So we actually manage 2 Scrum teams right now. So one for our proprietary software and one for Salesforce. So ultimately this role would be like supporting both of those. Kind of, we try to be on the front end of the sprints, so we are kind of like know what's coming. Right, and the developers are working on what's happening now, kind of a thing. So it's a mix of like planning and then making sure that what you plan gets actually executed properly.
Okay. It's gonna be a weird question, but what is the things that you guys would say you most like and least like?
Here?
Yeah.
I like our team. I think we have a really great team that we work with, and being in office together is pretty fun, actually. I'll think about my least. Go on.
I'd second that on the team, but then also just the level of like flexibility and like be able to do a lot and actually like make an impact. You're not like, okay, do this one thing, do that one thing, and then you turn around to your manager and you're like, all right, what's the next thing you want me to do? Like you're just doing like task by task, or you're balancing, which also then that makes you have to balance a lot of different responsibilities. But I think it's nice to be able to contribute that better.
Okay. I think.
I think. No, I think what you most like, it's like good. It's good and bad, right? When you have the ability to affect a company to the degree that we're talking about, there's positives in that. Hey, I feel like I've got ownership. I got belonging to this thing. It's like I really make. But at the same time, it's like there's pressure that goes into that. Sometimes for some people that's just not what they're looking for, right? They're looking for maybe a job where you have managers telling you specifically what you're going to be doing from this time to this time, and then next year I'm going to be doing this. There's like a really specific path.
Right.
That's not really the case, right? We're sort of building that out.
Okay.
Right. So you have to be more comfortable with the ambiguity that's just inherent in that, and some people are, some people aren't. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I would say like the opportunities, the biggest thing, like they mentioned, flexibility, ownership, but also like the growth potential here. Like we're trying to make like a pigeonhole in the marketplace, and we have like a lot of capital to do that, and that's exciting because normally it's the reverse, where we're trying to fit some kind of really tight budget and stay within some type of strict framework, where we're kind of in a place where we can help define the strategy of the company with the stuff that we build, which I think is cool.
Okay.
But to their point, there's a lot of projects going on, lots of stuff, so it will feel chaotic maybe sometimes, or like busy, and it's kind of just like, my philosophy is like, you just take one thing that you can do today, and if that gets done, then you're 1% closer to the whole project. So, but you kind of catch on, and the team is super nice and flexible. That's
I can see that now. You guys offer me some great coffee.
Oh, there's plenty of goods in the kitchen.
Yeah, it was
all sorts of snacks.
I was like I said, I'm a dynamic guy. I'll try things. When I seen there was like some regular standard coffee, but then I seen something that said sugar cookie. I said, okay, I'm gonna take a gamble on that. The hazel's cool. It's I don't know. Hey, the hazel's hit or miss depending on what coffee you go into. I'm getting to be kind of somewhat of a coffee connoisseur. Usually I go with Columbia, other place. When I seen that sugar cookie, I said, okay, I'm at the end.
We'll make sure Jenny gets it.
And it wasn't sweet.
yeah.
That's what I like. I'm a cream person. I can drink it just pure as it is, but I put my cream in there, and that got me going.
Yeah, those coffees over to the right, they all smell good. There's the one that smells like vanilla, and I think the hazelnut one's pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So, would it be safe to say that negotiation skills and presentation skills would be a good asset on a team like this?
Definitely, I think, yeah. I mean, you have to kind of present solutions to other parts of the business. There's like training involved as well.
Oh, so I could train people, you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do every 2 weeks after the sprint, we do a demo to the users for both sides of it, for the salesforce and for our internal software. So we bring the operations, show them. And it's half training, half presenting of like, hey, this is what we did, questions. And the negotiation aspect. I mean, sometimes you are negotiating on a solution in some ways of, all right, we want this, okay, we can do this for you, and then maybe that, and meeting somewhere in the middle.
Has he talked to Hedda at all about some of the test framework stuff that she's doing? Well, I didn't know if she was on the call before.
Oh, no.
Because that's the intention, to do some testing as well, right?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, testing is good. When I was at Hiawatha, I would have sessions like that. Very, very earlier in my career, I worked it's not on my resume, it would have been too long, but I worked at an IP video surveillance company in Burnsville. And every week, what I would do is, we were using Mac at that time. So I would download Mac applications, and basically what they would, if you guys ever heard of Milestone is a pretty big IPv. They were partnered up with them, so I would have like daily. I think maybe that kind of helped me with my technical instruction and got, because when you're talking to someone on the phone, it's a little different. When people get in front of groups, they get all nervous. And I learned when I was telling some of my students, I said, you just talk to one person, then talk to another, then ask another question. I said that, and that's how you get over that nervousness. And once you get in front of people enough, then it's, because it's not, I said, don't look at a panel as an enemy or an adversary. You just look at it like, you're learning from each perspective. And they were like, oh, okay, that's a good way to look at it. So I would be doing these daily trainings, or not daily trainings, but weekly trainings in each department. It might be the sales department, it might be the video technicians. They never had time because they were always flying out. But, the CEO wanted it to be where each week there's something new that people are learning about, like a new third-party application I could download. And so, that's kind of how I started to kind of get comfortable in like group settings,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that'd be super applicable for us. Awesome. I know we're kind of out of time. Is there anything else?
I'm good.
I guess the only question I had was, what would the next steps look like?
Yeah, so we're kind of wrapping up a bunch of in-person interviews, and then we'll kind of go over our list again, and then decide if we need to do any more follow-ups or go from there. But I think our goal is to kind of wrap up the process by the end of August.
Okay.
So hopefully in the next week or so we'll have some feedback for you. But we are hiring 2 people for this position.
Okay.
So, but I really liked meeting you and your experience. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the coffee. Thank you so much. Oh, no problem at all. Do you want me to bring this up? I'll go out this way.
Yes.
Okay. This is a nice view. Oh my goodness, you don't have to worry about, even if it's cloudy. Oh man. I win a lottery, I'm gonna get a building. Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Do I need to sign off?
No, you're
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
That went decent. Not rainy yet.
Rain hard today.
I heard there might be a little bit of rain. We got 77%. Okay. Oh, Saturday gonna be hot. All right. Follow us on the gram. They got Yeah, you got to keep your head up when it comes to this joint. All right, what we got over here? We got professional sisters out here. All right, let's see how far did I park away. I think I parked a little further. I think I overdressed. Just a little bit. That's a nice truck. Big truck. I've always liked the Ram. All right, let's see here. Probably should have used the restroom before I left, but that's just fine. I'll keep it going. They had a guy. We're gonna do this analysis real quick. All right, y'all. All right, let me get my AC going. Let me give y'all a quick analysis. Get my Dirks wipes.